One thing that's commonly asked of me from non-commercial agents and investors alike is what all the different commercial terms mean. Net operating income or NOI, cap rate, cash on cash, internal rate of return or IRR, and net present value or NPV. Knowing these terms and how to calculate them is essential to anyone who invests in real estate. This is especially true for new investors. If you're learning or if you're a bit unfamiliar with where to start, be sure to watch my How to Start Investing video. I'm going to explain each one of these in the same way I explain it to my clients in my two-part video. In this video, we'll discuss net operating income, cap rate, and cash on cash. In my Investing Terms Part 2 video, we'll tie in the internal rate of return and net present value. To start off, let's take a look at a make-believe commercial property investment. Here we have a property listed at about $2 million. To keep numbers simple, let's say that after all expenses, but not including the mortgage, principal, and interest, it nets $150,000 a year. Now, this $150,000 a year is called the net operating income, or NOI for short. It's what you make after accounting for all taxes and insurance, vacancy, credit losses, repairs, management, if there is any, utilities, and other miscellaneous costs. Again, this is not including the mortgage principal and interest. Also note that unlike a regular home loan, taxes and insurance are deducted before you get your NOI, not after. So here again, we have our $150,000 a year income on a $2 million property. Remember, this yearly income is called net operating income. We simply plug it into a formula that I always remember as IRV. Income over rate equals value. Income is the NOI we just discussed, which in this case is $150,000 a year. Rate is the cap rate, and value is the price of the property. Now, this formula can go multiple ways, just like simple math. If we plug in our income and our value, but we don't know our rate, we simply solve it by dividing by value. If you have a little trouble with math formula, don't stress yourself. I've got the 3 different ways to calculate this formula just in case you need assistance. Again, going back to our example, we know our income, we know we need to divide it by our value, and then solve for our cap rate. So let's do so. $150,000 divided by 2 million is 0.075 or 7.5%, which is our cap rate. Now, a lot of people get so stuck on the cap rate, they forget that it's not the best way to analyze a property's potential. When you think of a cap rate, think of a photograph or a snapshot. A cap rate is simply a quick, simple snapshot of a property for just 1 year as it stands without any financing. I also like to compare things to a bank account, since practically everyone has one and knows how it works. Most people know that savings accounts nowadays only pay what? 0.5 to 1.25%. So to compare it in this scenario, you're basically throwing $2 million into a bank account, or a property in this case, and in your first year you will be paid $150,000, presuming everything still flows the same with the property. Again, cap rate is only a snapshot. Now let's say you want to change something in the formula. Briefly, let's say you've taken a look at the numbers and you can't see how this property makes $150,000 a year. The more you look at it, the more you determine this place can really make about $135,000 a year. How much should you pay if you still want to buy it at a 7.5% cap rate? Well, again, let's look at the IRV formula. Income over rate equals value. Well, we know our new income, $135,000. We know our rate, 7.5%. So let's divide $135,000 by 7.5% or 0.075, and it equals 1.8 million. To keep the cap rate at 7.5%, you need to pay $1.8 million instead of $2 million. Think you got it now? Since I've explained what NOI is and how to find the cap rate, let's figure out how we can determine cash on cash. Pretend you don't have the full $2 million to buy the property cash, or presume you want to use leverage as I discussed in my leverage and how to use it properly video, and instead plan on putting down 35% and getting a loan for the rest. Well, a cap rate is really no longer going to give you an accurate depiction of how much money you're making now, is it? Remember, you're not putting $2 million in the bank anymore. You're talking about only putting $700,000 into the bank, and obviously you're not going to make $150,000 a year because now you have a loan to pay for. First, the loan is going to be a 65% loan to value amount, meaning that you put down 35% and they give you the remaining 65%. The interest rate is going to be 5.5% amortized over 30 years. For the sake of making things easy, let's pretend there's no loan points involved. This will give us an annual debt service of $88,575. Annual debt service is really just a fancy way of saying mortgage principal and interest over a year. Remember, we're paying $2 million for this property and it makes $150,000 a year. With the cap rate formula, that's basically a 7.5% return. Because we have a loan on it, numbers are now going to be a little different. We now have $700,000 invested as our down payment, and that $150,000 a year income is now down to $61,425 after paying all the debt service. Solving for cash on cash is a very similar formula as the IRV cap rate formula. You take the income per year, which is now adjusted to $61,425, and divide that by the total initial investment of $700,000, which equals 0.08775, or a little over 8.75%. As you can see, you actually make a higher return in this case by using leverage. The cap rate snapshot doesn't show the true value of what the property makes using leverage or basically having a loan on the property. If financing is even more favorable, be it a lower rate or the bank lending you 70 or 75%, then your cash on cash will actually go even higher. For example, in the same scenario, if you place only 30% down instead of 35% and get a 70% loan to value, that 8.775% jumps all the way up to 9.1. Going back to the bank example, imagine you throw $700,000 into the bank and they pay you $61,425 a year. You will be making 8.775% on your money, a significantly higher return than the 7.5% we were making looking at this through a snapshot lens of a cap rate formula. We're going to use the same example in my investing terms part 2 video, so be sure to watch that one next time you have a few minutes. In the meantime, be sure next time you analyze a property, you take into account what kind of return it can make with and without leverage. Sometimes it can make all the difference. Sometimes it might convince you that it's just better off to pay cash for the property you're looking at. Regardless of which it is, feel confident knowing you can calculate the difference between both scenarios and use the NOI and make an informed decision. Now that's good to know.